Political violence in Portland, Oregon is a sneak preview of our unraveling civil society if all Americans do not denounce it. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about Portland, Oregon. On June 29th, there was a protest and counter-protest that erupted into violence on the streets of Portland, and people were attacked. Many of them were injured, and obviously we don't want political violence in the streets of America. We should be having civil discussions. We should be having debates, but that's not what's happening here. People are putting on events, and then they're being attacked by a group called Antifa. They say they're anti-fascists, and that they're fighting fascists. They're trying to stop fascist violence. But then we see examples here where they're actually attacking journalists who have come to report on the event. And this one, he is actually posting right before the rally saying, "I am nervous about tomorrow's Portland Antifa rally. They're promising physical confrontation and have singled me out to be assaulted. I went on Tucker Carlson last year to explain why I think they're doing this. They're seeking meaning through violence." So the journalist Andy No here, he is on his way to report on the on this event, and then sure enough, he's attacked. And you can see here in the picture, he's getting milkshakes and other stuff throwing at him. He had to go to the hospital and get medical attention. He had a brain bleed. And so this obviously shouldn't be happening. I mean, what was he brandishing? A smartphone camera to take pictures of the protests that were going on. Senator Ted Cruz has issued a statement to federal law enforcement to investigate, quote, and bring legal action against a mayor who has, for political reasons, ordered his police officers to let citizens be attacked by domestic terrorists. And so what's he talking about here? Well, last year, the ICE union, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, they were asking the Portland mayor, Ted Wheeler, for protection because the Antifa was protesting outside of ICE headquarters, and people were being harassed and intimidated. But Wheeler told Portland police not to get involved when that was going on. And so there's clearly an example where in the past he's told the police to stand down. He said then, quote, "I want to be very clear. I do not want the Portland police to be engaged or sucked into a conflict, particularly from a federal agency that I believe is on the wrong track." So Wheeler was protesting as well the Trump anti-illegal immigration policies and stance that the president has taken. And so he was okay with Antifa doing this 38-day occupation outside of demonstration outside of ICE facilities. And so that's an example. Now his hands-off approach of Antifa is now coming under scrutiny as we see this violence erupting on the streets of Portland. And so you had this is the Oregonian reporting right before Portland Antifa right-wing protests escalate to civil disturbance. So you had a couple of demonstrations that were going on that day. One was by Proud Boys. The other was something called the Him Too movement. It seems to be against false rape allegations. And so that these protests were going on in Portland, and then Antifa shows up to go against it. And so that was what they were doing. They wanted to go against the Proud Boys. They wanted to go against the Him Too demonstrations and attack them. And surely that's what happened, and it erupted in violence. Now the Portland Police Association has issued its own statement on its view of against the political violence, and they say that Wheeler is tying the police's hands. So Ted Cruz is definitely onto something here. He says, this is Darrell Turner, president of Portland Police Association. He says, "The mayor, our police commissioner, is not allowed to use the rank and file officers of the Portland Police Bureau as a shield to deflect Portland's negative press nationwide. As we have said before and will continue to say, police officers work to uphold the Constitution including the right to free speech. It's our job to ensure that our community can peacefully protest without fear of violence. But right now, our hands are tied. It's time for our mayor to do two things: tell both Antifa and Proud Boys that our city will not accept violence in our city, and remove the handcuffs from our officers and let them stop the violence through strong and swift enforcement action. Enough is enough. And so the police are saying our hands are tied. We can't. They're being told to stand down. I guess they don't want the police to get involved with breaking up what amounts to rioting. I think you see some of these scenes that were going on. Here's Michelle Malkin reporting on it. She says that John and Adam were beaten by Antifa after they tried to help a gay man in a sundress who was being chased down the streets. They say they're not afraid of Antifa, but maybe they should be. Antifa is, this is not merely in Portland. The people are getting attacked across the country at various events. And so when Antifa targets an event and then you show up at the event, they're going to be there. You could, Andy, he knew he was being targeted and he went to the event to report on it anyways. He wanted to exercise his First Amendment rights. And he was attacked for it, and that's really that's horrible. I don't think that should be going on in America. I think that we should be allowed to have peaceful demonstrations. People can express their views without attacking people. They say they're going against Nazis, and then this is the guy they find. This is no Nazi. This is a journalist who had a smartphone. He was trying to take pictures of the event, and he was attacked. And I think that's outrageous. We need to stand up against political violence, and this should not be happening. And so, but how did this happen? Well, the organizers of one of the protests stated, this is Haley Adams' post on Facebook, and she was receiving questions about why they didn't get a permit for their event on June 29. She says that they've done that in the past. This pattern has been continuing at many right-wing events in Portland over the years. In order to receive a permit, you have to agree to these sorts of conditions where their weapons will be checked and things like that. Quote, while we have done that in the past, we chose not to this time, so we would have the ability to defend ourselves and others once Antifa attacked first, which they always do without fail. It is honestly dangerous to protest in Portland as you risk being checked for what could save your life, be told where to go by law enforcement, only to have them leave you for dead to Rose City Antifa. As such, the days of having them tell us what to do now are over. If Antifa are allowed to go where they want, coordinate to attack us, carry weapons without being checked, and police won't do anything about them literally trying to kill us, then the time for community self-defense has come, because we're not going to take it anymore. June 29 proved more than anything that we can't rely on anyone to help or protect us, and that if you want to do something right, you have to do it yourself and organize. Wow. So what Haley Adams here is saying is that because the police aren't protecting themselves, they didn't get a permit for this most recent event, and so they could basically bring weapons to defend themselves. So they were prepared for a fight, and surely enough, fights broke out. People were arrested across the city. People were injured, and eventually the thing gets dispersed. But this was kind of a predictable event if the police were doing their job or allowed to do their job. In this case, Mayor Ted Wheeler all the blame seems to fall at his feet. Why are they telling the police not to break up riots? I think that in Oregon, there's a whole chapter of offenses against public order, intimidation, rioting, disorderly conduct. This is standard fare for municipal ordinances and for state ordinances to have. You shouldn't be having violent gangs in the street with weapons. This isn't the gangs in New York where everyone shows up on the street to kick the crap out of each other. This is America, and this is not supposed to be going on here. I think that this is destructive for our civil society. But I think, clearly the blame here, that Mayor Ted Wheeler, he's got a lot to do with this. They need to let the police do their jobs. The Portland Police Association, I think, is very clear in its statement that they're being handcuffed right now by politicians who don't want to restore civil order, restore to civil society. And so, in short, our civil society is unraveling before our eyes. And now people are standing up and saying, well, if the police aren't going to defend us, we're going to defend ourselves. And so that's going to lead to more political violence. And so I think we need to stand against political violence. This is not how we're going to solve this. We need to restore civil order. President Trump, he was blamed for blaming both sides and criticizing political violence after Charlottesville. But you know who also condemned violence on both sides with these riots was Martin Luther King. He was very emphatic about this. He said, quote, hate begets hate, violence begets violence, toughness begets a greater toughness. We must meet the forces of hate with the power of love. Our aim must never to be to defeat or humiliate, but to win friendship and understanding. And so King, his whole career, he was talking about, he's speaking out against racial injustice and extremist white violence, but he was also speaking out against violence that was committed by blacks. He said that there are in several cities that had exploded in violence. He called it, quote, an irrational burst of rage that had sought to say something, but the flames were blackened by both themselves and their oppressors. And so he understood why the riots were occurring at the time. He called it the language of the unheard, but he also criticized them and said that they were, quote, riots are socially destructive and self-defeating, and, quote, there's no practical or moral answer in the realm of violence, and, quote, there is no violent solution to social injustices. And that's exactly what Trump was saying in response to Charlottesville. He said, we must all stand united and condemn all that hate stands for. There is no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one. He was right. And this is not different from what the Portland police are now saying. They don't want any political violence in the streets. And so what else did Trump say at the time? He said, we're closely following the events. We condemn in strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides, it's been going on a long time in our country. And so Trump he's called for the swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play or be with their parents and have a good time. So obviously, Portland is not on my top list of vacation destinations right now. Apparently, if you're a conservative or a Trump supporter, or you just think that Antifa is politically violent and they shouldn't be doing this in the streets of America, I guess you'll be targeted. If you oppose political violence, that I suppose makes you a fascist, but in their eyes. But I think it makes you a sane American to stand against political violence. We have a two-party system. We must maintain that. We have freedom of speech. We don't attack our political opponents. That's wrong. Attacking your political opponents with violence is terrible. It's illegal. You shouldn't do that. I don't think that we should be gathering weapons to meet Antifa on the street. I think that's a bad idea. I think you're liable to get hurt if you do that. This is just, this is a bad situation, and it's going to get worse until politicians stop playing politics. I think that if you have rioters in your city, you have to shut it down. And you need to have allow for peaceful demonstrations under the First Amendment. And if things get out of hand, the crowds need to be dispersed, and that's what police are supposed to be doing. But they say that their hands are being tied right now. They say, quote, remove the handcuffs from our officers and let them stop the violence through strong and swift enforcement action. Enough is enough. And I think that's right. I think we need to stand with the police on this one. I think they have a good understanding of what's going on in their cities. And they're saying that the politicians are getting in the way of breaking up violent political violence by Antifa and other groups who, I guess, want to meet them on the streets with weapons. And they're looking for trouble. Everyone's looking for trouble here, except for the vast majority, the 99% of people who don't want political violence and think that this is terrible. And so we're seeing civil society unravel. And so I think this is just the beginning. And the worst thing civil society can do in the face of it is nothing. A permissive environment has encouraged this violence to grow and spread. And when it goes unanswered, now opposing partisans are appearing to confront it in the streets. They want to take matters into their own hands. Anarchy, that's a power vacuum. That shouldn't be happening in modern cities in America. And I'll leave you with the close here. Assuming a state of political violence is not the America we want to live in and raise our families in, it's time to let the police do their jobs. Public officials that get in the way are complicit with staging that violence. The civil society must be restored. Everyone, Republicans, Democrats, and everyone in between, need to speak in unison against political violence before it is too late. What we're seeing in Portland might be a sneak preview of what's coming to all of our neighborhoods if we do nothing now. And that's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a great day.